This is the Daily Rundown, November 14, 2018. Local and national news by KPPP-LP 88.1 FM. Hey everyone, this is Cindy.
And this is Duke.
You're listening to 88.1 FM, KPPP-LP Fargo-Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. In local news, we have some updates on the Moorhead changes to polling locations.
Yeah, you'll remember that Moorhead took this up in late October, and they had closed 2 voting stations on local college campuses. So there was some accusations that they broke the law, and a local person named Mark Altenberg had actually filed a pleading to hold him accountable, but he was told he filed in the wrong district, and he'd have to take it up with the Supreme Court. Well, the Moorhead City Council met last night, and they were going to discuss the elimination of the polling places in 2 Moorhead campuses. This has been in the news since October, and Moorhead officials were accused of making these changes illegally. The council discussed the issue and took some public input. Some was very heated. Council member Steve Gertz denied disenfranchising votes of students at Concordia and Minnesota State University. He said smart students can figure this stuff out. He said that students had 45 days to vote early, plus discounted Uber rides to get to the polls on Election Day. Mayor Delray Williams chimed in and said basically that she would threaten to veto any upcoming resolution that did not include polling places in both campuses. One of the students that was coordinating votes brought some polling numbers, and he said that 221 MSUM students voted and 211 Concordia students voted on November 6th. The council did not make any decision last night, and they decided that they will take up the issue at their next council meeting on November 26th. Before the council votes on the polling location resolution, there will be a chance for public input.
So stupid students are the ones that don't make it to the polls?
That's right, and this whole idea that you're going to disenfranchise voters, imagine if it was seniors in a senior center, and he's like, well, those seniors could have taken an Uber ride over to the polling place. There's actually a YouTube video of his rant. It was pretty,
ugly.
And they also haven't admitted or been pursued that they'd broken the law, but they're going to take this up again, and they might come up with a whole different scheme of a voting place that both students from Concordia and MSUM will vote at. That's going to be put out on November 26th. I think resolutions actually need 3 readings, so it'll probably be the first reading on November 6th, but then would be 2 subsequent council meetings before it actually became a law.
I see a pattern of basically shaming and blaming the voters for not being able to go and vote if their polling locations were shut down or they're otherwise disenfranchised. Al Yeager was saying that the voter ID law that was enacted in North Dakota was not that big of a deal, even though clearly it was going to disenfranchise Native American voters. And he said that, it's a very simple request to get the ID with your address on it. Everyone can do it. And there's that tone deaf, kind of response to voters that are being disenfranchised that it's their own fault if they're not getting out there and doing whatever they have to do to hustle to get their vote in.
Yeah, and it should be exactly opposite. Our government officials should be embracing democracy. They should have every citizen or every community member opportunity to actually participate in government. So when they do these sorts of things, you have to start guessing at what their motivation is, which is basically they don't want people to come out and vote. And students have also been targeted as worthless and a weight on society type thing. But if you look at those numbers, about 500 students voting in this past election, where they actually had to leave their campus and go blocks and blocks away, it shows that there's some interest. And all the government should be doing is should be encouraging voting and putting in as many places to make it accessible.
Can you imagine how many more voters would have been able to easily vote if they hadn't changed those polling locations?
Yeah.
I mean, I know the argument was that they didn't hardly have any voters in the last election. But to me, that argument is the same as when government institutions or agencies are basically choked out, like they tried to do with the Moorhead Human Rights Commission, by not funding it properly, not staffing things properly, not giving people the opportunity. They suppress the use of these institutions, of these places, and then they say when people don't go and use them anymore because they basically cut the resources and the availability, that's proof that it's not needed.
Exactly.
And it's a circular argument, but it's being used to disenfranchise voters. And I have not experienced this level of naked aggression against democracy in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Do you recall another time when this kind of abuse of power and tone deafness on the part of those disenfranchising voters?
Well, it's kind of like the pot is warming up and it's about to boil, and we're frogs in the pot, and we haven't noticed how hot it is. They did a Congress did an Help America Vote Act, I think 15 years ago, and it was designed on the same thing, to make sure that people who didn't change their IDs or didn't have proper IDs, they had to define what proper IDs were, and it's like ever since then, they've been disenfranchising voters through that route to try to make it hard to have credentials to actually vote. And even in North Dakota, where there's no voter registration, they've enacted three or four times in the legislature to make voting harder. It should be Make Voting Harder Act.
Yeah. You know, and America has a very ugly history of disenfranchising black and brown people from voting.
Yeah.
And I believe that we should be ashamed nationally at what we are seeing, and that we should, take a lesson from history and do the right thing now. Well, in national news, Consumer Reports magazine is warning that as shoppers are heading to the store this week to buy their Thanksgiving turkeys, an outbreak of deadly drug-resistant salmonella strain is continuing to sicken consumers across the nation. Yet neither the turkey industry nor the USDA has publicly released any details about which turkey products or brands are part of this outbreak that has currently hospitalized 63 people and killed one. This outbreak of salmonella in raw turkey products has been going on for a year and is linked to 164 illnesses in 35 states. One person in California died, and available information indicates that almost half of those getting sick are hospitalized. The tainted turkey has even been found in pet food. The CDC says the outbreak strain, called Salmonella reeding, has been found in live turkeys and many kinds of raw turkey products, indicating it might be widespread in the turkey industry. Federal officials have shared their findings with the turkey industry and asked about steps that may be taken to reduce contamination. But they haven't yet told the public which producers, suppliers, or brands of turkey could be contaminated.
Well, and it's a week before Thanksgiving. This is when turkeys are, sold mostly in the United States. A huge amount of turkeys are sold, right around Thanksgiving. And the idea that they're not showing, where the products are from, a lot of times when there's recalls, they'll list the products, the number on the product, so you know exactly what you have in your pantry or your freezer is contaminated, or you should take it back, get your money back, get rid of it. They haven't produced this yet, which to me is very strange. There's some petitions online that you can sign that demand that they release the names and the places. I don't know what's behind it not releasing or letting people know. It's probably because there's a lot of salmonella out there, so people are going to have to take precautions with any turkey products that they have right now.
Well, I mean, the USDA is one of the government institutions, and under this administration, a lot of those institutions, as I just said, aren't being properly staffed or funded.
Yeah, they've been gutted.
They are, and it's a big concern. So I have some safety advice for turkey preparation.
Oh, good.
The USDA is being asked currently to publicly expose which brands and products and suppliers have the salmonella outbreak, but Consumer Reports has given out some important advice on safely preparing and cooking a turkey. First of all, you should cook all turkey to an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit before eating. Use a meat thermometer to check the temperature throughout the turkey and in the stuffing. Secondly, wash your hands frequently, both during and after handling raw turkey. Third, you should avoid washing raw turkey before preparing it. That's because This may spread the germs around your kitchen. And fourth, you should be sure to thoroughly wash all countertops, cutting boards, utensils, and any other kitchen items that may come into contact with the raw turkey. Finally, don't give your pets raw turkey meat. You can get sick if you handle raw pet food and don't wash your hands properly, and your pets can get sick from salmonella too.
Yeah, you don't want that.
No, so, I mean, I hope this doesn't ruin anybody's Thanksgiving, this news, and, you know, honestly, it is very scary, so people might want to choose a different, you know, maybe you'll go for the ham for Thanksgiving.
That's right, or faux turkey.
Right, but I think that with these extra precautions of washing and cooking and properly taking the temperature, you can avoid a lot of the salmonella.
Great turkey talk.
Thank you. CBS is reporting that authorities searching through the blackened aftermath of California's wildfires released on Wednesday the names of another 80 people who are still missing, including many in their 80s and 90s. The elderly are really suffering, and I'm sure that people that are disabled and other people that don't have the ability to evacuate are really suffering these wildfires. Officials in Northern California said Tuesday that search crews had found 6 more bodies, bringing the death toll from the so-called Camp Fire to 48 and the statewide total to 50. As the names of the missing were made public, additional crews joined the search. We want to be able to cover as much ground as quickly as we possibly can, Butte County Sheriff Corey Hanea said. This is a very difficult task. A new lawsuit blames the fires on a major utility, the Pacific Gas and Electric Company, for allegedly failing to inspect and properly maintain its power lines. In a statement, PG&E said customers' safety was its highest priority, and it's focusing on helping first responders. 500 miles south, firefighters have made progress battling the Woolsey fire. Some neighborhoods were reopened, and residents have been able to see if their homes survived.
Yeah, and I like looking at the maps. I don't know the geography very well in California. So I have been checking in, so there are some facts that are available today, to see where the fires are at and how, what's happening, with all these deaths and destruction. The California Wildfires Fast Facts, the firefighters are battling 3 major wildfires in California. Here's a breakdown of the numbers as of Wednesday morning, according to CAL FIRE and local officials. Campfire, location, Butte County, 135,000 acres burned, 35% contained, 48 fatalities confirmed, 3 firefighters injured, 8,817 structures destroyed, 7,600 of them were homes. That's just one fire. There's 3 that's reporting on. Woolsey Fire. Woolsey Fire. Location, Los Angeles County, Ventura County. 620,000 acres have been burned. It's been 47% contained. 2 fatalities confirmed. 3 firefighters injured. 435 structures destroyed. 57,000 are in danger still. And the Hill Fire. Location, Ventura County. 4,531 acres burned, 94% contained. Now, when I look at those, 2 of them aren't even 50% contained, so they are still burning. The Hill Fire looks like it's almost totally contained, and that's Ventura County, but the Woolsey Fire, which is Malibu is part of, still is only 47% contained. So half the fire is still burning there. So there's lots of structures in danger, and if people have stayed there, they're in danger. And the campfire is basically only 35% contained, which there's a lot of fires going out there in California still.
I know, it's terrifying. I've watched some of the videos that people have taken of themselves while they're trying to escape and they're driving through the fires. There was one we watched recently where there was a family in the vehicle, and they escaped, thankfully.
Oh, yeah.
And they said that they saw a woman whose car didn't make it. Some people's tires were popping from the heat, and there were the roads were engulfed with smoke and fire, literally raining down from the sky.
Wow.
Branches, breaking branches and things falling on the cars. And they saw a woman running with her baby.
Wow.
They obviously did not stop to help her. You can just imagine the horrific things that are happening out there to people, what they're witnessing, what they're experiencing themselves. It really is an apocalyptic scene. I don't know if there has been any more information about how exactly the Pacific Gas and Electric Company were irresponsible, I guess, or negligent in maintaining their power lines. But it seems to me that this may be one of the most horrific and damaging catastrophes that have taken place in the country recently with, I mean, even above and beyond natural disasters. So I'm curious to see how PG&E will be taken to task for the damages caused to property and people. In addition to that, there's a lot of talk right now about the firefighters. As you mentioned, several have been injured and even some have been killed. But what has not been discussed as much is how many of those firefighters are actually prisoners that are being paid $2 a day and $1 an hour. Many are having debates on whether or not that would be considered slavery. What do you think of
slavery? They're still captive. You know, the whole idea of letting prisoners out to do work and do community service, sending them into a fire, sending them into a very dangerous situation, and also, you know, firefighters get paid, you know, a wage that connects with the danger of the job they're doing. So to have prisoners out there it's like a workforce that's expendable, and it shows a lack of responsibility. You know, if people volunteered, if people had the opportunity just to volunteer and they really wanted to do it, you know, that would be their business, you know. But the compensation should be something that actually pays people, because they are human beings and they're people, and they're trying to save people's property. People in Malibu, so some of the richest people in this country, their homes are burning and they can't do anything about it. And there's prisoners out there trying to stop that damage. Oh, it sounds very hypocritical to me.
Well, you know, there is one thing I have to correct about what you said. They may very well be humans, but they're considered property.
Yeah.
The property of the state, the property of the prisons. So if they lose limb or life, they are not celebrated and they are not recognized as any other first responder hero would be.
That's true.
And that is a tragedy. And another tragic story, Cook County coroners have now confirmed that Midlothian police just outside of Chicago murdered a hero security guard who disarmed and stopped a shooter who was holding him down, awaiting police assistance. He was a black man doing his job and saving lives when police showed up and shot him dead. His name was Jamel Robertson. Robertson wanted to become a cop, and his partner, Avantea, have a 9-month-old baby named Tristan and another baby on the way. Avantea is nearly 3 months pregnant. In addition to his job as a security guard, Jamel played for Purpose Church for the past several years.
Wow.
CBS is reporting that in their first official account, the police shooting, Illinois State Police say the guard, Jamel Robertson, ignored an officer's multiple verbal commands to drop his gun and get on the ground. State Police account contradicts witnesses who say Robertson, 26, was wearing clothing that identified him as a security guard. Police say he was wearing plain black clothing with no markings. State police are investigating the shooting by the white officer from Midlothian Police Department who has not been identified by the press or the department. Protesters gathered Tuesday outside the Midlothian Police Headquarters carrying portraits of Robertson. Quote, "This young man has a 9-month-old son. He'll never see his child grow up," said local pastor Anthony Williams. This young man wanted to be a police officer. This young man was a child of God. He worked in the church and lost his life, unfortunately. So we want justice. Police said a gunman had entered Manny's Blue Room Lounge in Robbins early Sunday morning and shot and wounded multiple people inside the bar. When officers arrived at the scene, Roberson was holding down a suspect outside of the bar, according to witnesses. An attorney for Roberson's mother says Roberson was wearing a hat emblazoned with the word security when he was shot. Gregory E. Kulis, who filed a lawsuit contending the shooting was unjustified and unprovoked, said police release is woefully incomplete. The police release is woefully incomplete. For starters, he said witnesses have told him that they yelled repeatedly before both before and as officers were raising their weapons that Roberson was a security guard. Kulis suggested it's possible there was no mention of Robert's Nick Cap because witnesses said it came off as emergency workers were administering CPR. Another security guard at the tavern said the officer jumped onto the bar and waved an assault rifle before running outside and murdering the guard, Kulis said. Kulis and the surviving guard told him that the officer pointed a gun at him until he screamed that he was security. That's when he jumped off the bar, waving the gun, and ran outside the door, said Kulis, who declined to identify the other security guard. An official in a neighboring community has echoed the call for prosecutors to investigate, saying they're concerned race played a role in the shooting. Here is a security guard who is subduing a suspect, but the officer just sees a black man with a gun and kills him, Alderman Keith Price said. Kulis wouldn't say if he thinks race played a role in Chicago area shooting, but the fact that the officer is white and Roberson was black has prompted many, including a prominent local African-American newspaper columnist, to question the officer's thinking. I believe a police officer showing up at a chaotic scene where a white man has a gun would have at least hollered for him to put the gun down before opening fire, Chicago Sun-Times columnist Mary Mitchell wrote after the shooting, but too often black men are not given the benefit of the doubt. The Illinois State Police wouldn't respond to a series of questions from CBS News, including regarding the contradictory accounts of Roberson's clothing, how much time elapsed between the time the officer shouted commands and opened fire, whether video exists of the shooting, whether the officer pointed his gun at another security guard, and how they respond to those who say race played a role. A spokesman, said the investigation is ongoing and no further information outside of the statement would be released at this time. They say there's footage. Where is the footage? Let due process properly take its place in terms of what happened here, said Pastor Mitchell Lee Hicks. If any police body cam video exists, no state law requires that it be released. The Chicago Police Department releases videos within 90 days of shooting, but that policy doesn't apply because that agency's officers weren't involved in this shooting. Kulis also said he doesn't yet know how many times Roberson was shot or where on his body he was shot. I talked to the family after they viewed his body, and they said the authorities did not tell them how many times he'd been shot. In his $1 million federal lawsuit, Kulis contends that the officer who shot Roberson violated the man's Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable searches and seizures.
Well, this is a horrible story, and where law enforcement just doesn't come right up and deal with the wrongs of their officers. It's disgusting. You know, and all the mass shootings that happen in this country, and there's all this talk about, you know, if there was an armed guard there, if a person had a gun, they would have prevented it. And we have an armed law enforcement officer getting killed at that country bar. Mm-hmm. Now we have a security guard who's black, gets shot by the cop when he's holding the shooter down. And that he jumped up on the bar and acted like Rambo. and waved his gun around. As you were reporting on that, I thought, oh, was that the shooter? No, it was an officer who came in for the call of a active shooter shooting people in a public place, and he kills the security guard. And that they question race has anything to do with this? It's like, duh. Just look. The man was black. The officer shot a black man because he had a gun, even though he was identified as a security guard.
And where is the NRA in all of this? They're always talking after a shooting about, how the guns will save the world. Yeah. Guns are the answer. And they're always defending shooters in situations. Why aren't they defending this black man?
Because they want black people to have guns.
He was a good guy in a spot where there was an active shooter, mm-hmm. and he saved lives. He stopped a man who had shot 4 people. Mm-hmm. 4 people. He saved the lives of countless others by stopping the active shooting situation, subduing this man, and they killed him for that.
Wow.
I have one piece of advice for people of color, and that is, don't become a cop. Mm-hmm. I know that representation is everything, but how on earth are black people supposed to feel safe, supposed to feel that their children, that their husbands, that their brothers will come home safely at night, knowing that white people shoot first and ask questions later, mm-hmm. whenever they see a black person, especially one with a weapon?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you feel about the fact that the body cam or, video footage hasn't been released, and there isn't even a law that requires it?
Mm-hmm. And plus, the family hasn't even been told about his autopsy. So they're sitting there with a dead son and a dead relative without any information, and none being released. And the idea that the body cam, or the video footage isn't being let out, that tells me that it shows a lot of guilt. Shows me that they're going to try to cover up. Sure, there's a lawsuit and there's liability, but it's still evidence. It's still the truth. And they have to fess up and deal with. And what is a person's life worth? Is it worth $1 million? No, life is worth a lot more than that. So they should deal with it and be accountable for it.
As we have learned since cameras have become relatively simple to operate off of your phone, and they're everywhere, and there's security cameras, and there's, vehicle cameras in police cars, and there's body-worn cameras on police officers. What we have learned, even as police officers have really avoided and fought for those videos not to be made public. Mm-hmm. What we have learned time and time again is that the official police story that is given when a black or brown person is murdered is usually false.
Yes.
What we have learned is that cops lie. Their perceptions are incorrect a lot of the time, and that they withhold evidence and information, that they plant guns on deceased people after they shoot them in the back, mm-hmm. and that they will lie about it. So I don't understand why we are still repeatedly giving the benefit of the doubt immediately after a shooting to the police. Can anyone explain to me why we're still doing that?
No, I don't. I think it can be explained that law enforcement agencies have basically taken on a stance that they are not to be questioned, that they can't be questioned, that they're a form of government that is at a very high level of government, even though many of them are basically supervised by local city commissions, city councils, because they are the administrative part of the city, and law enforcement falls under that, and county, of course, falls under the county commission. But they're unreachable. Those city commissioners, county commissioners really don't have access to the police departments, and they form their own policy. And they have national organizations that they're part of, that they learn this stuff, that they learn these techniques, that they get marching orders basically across the country to act in unison as law enforcement. They're a paramilitary organization that has a facade that they're supposed to protect and serve, And they are a law enforcement agency that basically rules and controls its community. And this is a prime example of where they walk into a place and shoot someone who is stopping a crime, and they're not accountable for the crime they committed. They are above the law, and they are law enforcement. And we've let that happen as a community. We've let that happen in our elections. We have no oversight when it comes to law enforcement.
And just remember that in yesterday's news, we reported that Jeff Sessions, before leaving his duty as the top law enforcer in the country, changed the consent agreements so that it would be much harder to hold police accountable and investigate them.
Exactly.
In other national news, President Donald Trump is once again, for the second year in a row, skipping the Kennedy Center honors. And he and his wife Melania have turned down the invitation to the Kennedy Center Honors event slated for December 2nd. This came from Stephanie Grisham, the First Lady's spokeswoman, on Tuesday. Grisham also confirmed for USA Today that the Trumps turned down the invitation due to a scheduling conflict. Hey, Duke, this time it wasn't rain. Trump is scheduled to travel to Argentina at the end of the month to participate in the G20 summit. Several of this year's honorees, including vocal Trump critics Lin-Manuel Miranda and Cher, might not mind the president's absence. In fact, Cher said she wished to receive the prestigious honor so badly during the Obama administration, and told the Associated Press she would be thrilled if Trump didn't attend. Other honorees include country music star Reba McEntire, composer Philip Glass, and jazz legend Wayne Shorter. Manuel will receive a special Trailblazer honor for the musical sensation Hamilton, along with director Thomas Calley, choreographer Andy Blankenbuehler, and music director Alex Lacamoire. They will be recognized for their groundbreaking work on the hip-hop musical about the country's founding fathers, a first in the Kennedy Center's 41-year history. The show will air Wednesday, December 26th at 8 p.m. Eastern Pacific time.
Yeah, that Trump doesn't want to go to anything, even things that, there's no protocol with this president. There's no honors that the president shows up to things, that things that other presidents have been to, look at the whole Veterans Day, dodging going to any significant event and showing any sort of honors for the veterans of this country. And, and I can just see the guy going, I don't want to go to that. I don't want to go to that. I have plans. And, the only thing he's going to go to are rallies. So if you're planning a rally event and you invite him, he's going to come. But if it's something to honor anything else, especially anything that honors any people of color, he's not going to show up.
No, and, it's not just that he has to be front and center. It is that he is resentful of anything that doesn't honor him as the centerpiece, as the showcase of an event. So he wouldn't be able to stand going to a Kennedy's honor event and watch Lin-Manuel Miranda get an award. If you recall, Vice President Pence went to Hamilton and got up and walked out.
Oh, that's right. Do
you remember that?
Yeah, I do now, yes.
It isn't just this president.
Mm-hmm.
It is this administration that has a, they dislike the contributions of people of color, of athletes. They dislike the voices of those people and their actions as being honored or respected.
Yeah.
He has been a very outspoken critic of black athletes that have been kneeling as more and more black people have been killed by police officers without cause. So I find it interesting that he has been unable as president to fulfill even the most simple of ceremonial duties. How many times has he walked out of a signing ceremony for a bill that just passed?
That's right.
Without signing the bill?
Yep.
It's at least on 3 occasions What do you make of this? Is it dementia, or does he just not give a rip?
Well, that's the hard one. It's like I would like to think that there's something wrong with him that is affecting his ability to be aware of anything, but I believe that he is just that way. You know, I've watched some of these documentaries on him and I've seen him speak when he was younger. The only difference I see when he's younger is he could string together the sentences a lot faster, but he did talk exactly the same. He doesn't have a very large vocabulary of words, and his awareness, you know, that on what he's doing and what he really is supposed to be. And so when he stands up, when he goes into a room and acknowledging that a bill is going to be signed into law by his signature, he waves at the cameras and stands there at the podium, looks around, and gets all his pictures taken. And he's like, well, I'm done here now, and starts walking out, and people like to have to herd him like a cat back over to where the bill is, you know, and have him sign it. He's, oh, that's right, you know, sometimes he laughs like, geez, I forgot. But it's happened more than once. One of those things should be like, oh, whoops, that was a mishap. But no, it seems like it's common for him. So I do believe that he is demented, that he does not take anything seriously he's doing, that he's been elected, and he's just so self-absorbed that that's what runs his day.
And also, it seems to me that he cannot stand even the specter of something making him look stupid or silly or, you know, not concentrated.
Mm-hmm.
He gets so upset about that. I saw once when he was at a signing ceremony that he forgot to sign the bill, where he was walking out and people tried to stop him. And he just, when he realized what a blunder, how stupid he looked, he left anyway.
Wow.
He decided he would not come back in that room and be humiliated in front of those cameras. Recently, we saw President Trump walk out, talk to the press, and then leave, make a big, you know, loops to go back to get Melania. How many times has he simply forgotten Melania is there?
Mm-hmm.
One time, I believe it was when Hurricane Maria occurred, President Trump said that Melania wished that she could be here, and she literally was standing right next to him.
Yes, I remember that.
I mean, it really does beg the question whether there's something wrong with his memory.
Yes, capacity.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because how can you... I mean, he could theoretically just be that narcissistic that he doesn't see past his own nose, that he doesn't care about anyone else. We recently saw the president get on Air Force One and just leave his umbrella on the ground like he's, you know, some king of some country.
Yeah, oh, he is.
And he just doesn't care about, you know, trying to be human.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't seem to have the capacity to do that. He gets very upset, and he's been brooding lately because of the losses in the midterm elections and how badly his, you know, no-show in France at the tomb, at the American cemetery, honoring American veterans, made him look.
Yeah.
He was very angry at the person that briefed him on his staff for not telling him how badly this, you know, what a public relations nightmare it was going to be for him not to attend.
Like he didn't know that, you know. Well, here's some news for you, Mr. Trump. You shouldn't skip anything. You should go to everything and show honor and respect and compassion for every event you go to. And these events are for other people, not for you. So anything that you do just for you is going to be something that people are going to talk about in the press, because you shouldn't be doing it that way. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Very true. MSN News is reporting that Georgia legislator was arrested at work and says that she was singled out as a black female senator. Georgia Senator Nikema Williams, a Democrat from Atlanta, was arrested along with more than a dozen other protesters at the Georgia state capitol on Tuesday afternoon at a demonstration asking the state to count every vote from last week's gubernatorial election. Protesters shouted, "Let her go," as Williams was handcuffed while the General Assembly was in session. Williams, a civil rights advocate who organized domestic workers for Democratic gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams, was charged with a misdemeanor obstruction of justice and spent 6 hours at the Fulton County Jail in Atlanta. There are countless Georgians who cast their ballots and still don't feel like their voices are heard, she said in a statement after being released from jail. I joined them down on the floor, and I was singled out as a black female senator standing in the rotunda with the constituents. One of Williams' white male colleagues, State Representative David Dreyer, a Democrat from Atlanta, went to the same protest with Williams for the same reason, but was not arrested. He stood outside the jail after her arrest and spoke out about Williams' unfair treatment by the Capitol Police. Dreyer said he went down to the Capitol about the same time as Williams did, but, quote, for some reason, Senator Williams was treated differently than I was treated, unquote. Dreyer noted the statistic that 1 in 3 black men and 1 in 18 black women will be incarcerated at some time in their lives. Because of our system, because of the bias and the way that our laws are enforced, just like I went down with Senator Williams to try to de-escalate the situation, Senator Williams was taken away, he said. We understand she's been left in a van for a very long time on a cold and rainy day. Dreyer added, for some reason, I saw Capitol Police lined up 3 abreast, row after row after row, looking like they were trying to stop a riot when we were standing up for people's rights to vote. So this is not a democracy. This looks a lot more like an authoritarian government. And it seems like that's happening a lot these days, doesn't it? The Georgia gubernatorial election was called for Republican Brian Kemp, and Kemp has begun to transition into the office. But Kemp, who oversaw the election as Secretary of State, is accused of rampant voter suppression and has lost several court cases over his attempts to block voters of color from the polls. His opponent, Abrams, is about 58,000 votes behind him as ballot counts are still being finalized, but she needs only about 20,000 more votes to force a runoff. She refuses to concede until all votes are counted, and about 25 counties have yet to certify their results. Williams is the first woman to hold her state legislative seat, a seat once held by the late civil rights leader Julian Bond. In the spirit of Bond, she said she will keep fighting for a fair election despite her arrest. I am incredibly proud and will continue to stand with the citizens of Georgia to demand that their votes be counted, she said.
Well, this article brings out different issues within issues. And, one, making sure votes are counted. And I'm also giving the information of what the goal is. But a demonstration and the legislator who gets elected, gets arrested by the Capitol Police in the Georgia State Capitol, and she's a black woman, and she was racially profiled, and it's obvious. And also, she described how the law enforcement worked, that they were basically lined up for a riot. This is the way law enforcement deals with protest. First Amendment rights, right? The right of assembly is met with might, met with weapons, met with shields, met with clubs, met with things that are going to harm you. That's what our law enforcement does. They've been testing it for years. They used it out in Standing Rock. It's a great model. They distributed military equipment to law enforcement agencies across this whole nation. They are equipped to basically shut any protests down. They call them protests. These are assemblies of people addressing their grievances with the government, protected under the Constitution. Not. Mm-hmm. Then within the story, they talk about what is the goal of this. If she gets within 20,000 more votes, it'll be a runoff election. Now, this isn't if it's a recount and it shows that she won, that would be one thing, but she could still lose, and it would, if the vote is close enough, within I forget, it's 50% plus one. You have to have a runoff if one candidate doesn't have 50% plus one. And the runoff means a whole new election. Mm-hmm. The time is ticking, though. The election would have to take place December 4th. So as they do this recount and they get to a point, there might be an election that there's only 2 weeks of campaigning to happen, and also getting people aware to go out and vote. Go out and vote in that election. Go out and vote in the recall election. Your vote is definitely going to count in that election.
This is a multi-layered attack, a multi-pronged attack on the democracy, on our rights as people of color to participate in democracy, because there is all of these voter suppression tactics. We've talked about them before, especially in the states of Georgia and Florida, with regard to robocalls, misleading information, with regard to taking voters off the rolls, with the postcards that are sent out, and if they're not responded to, they're taken off the rolls and assumed to have moved out of the state. Brian Kemp has really taken a page out of the voter suppression playbook and used every tactic imaginable in the state of Georgia against black voters.
Yeah, directly.
And he's being rewarded by getting the nomination. I have a huge problem with the media. The media also has a responsibility to hold off on calling elections and basically validating to the public that the person that they call a winner has actually won the votes, when that is not known by the outlets that are making these kinds of claims.
Yeah, they just ignore that, because every voting place has a canvassing board, a board that approves the actual vote, and it happens usually a week or two after the election. Also, we've talked a lot about absentee ballots. Absentee ballots are counted after the election in many cases, because there's a deadline that's different for them. So they get included in the final vote. Now, in the news, they're trying to call these elections. I'm like, they called that election when there's only 3% of the precincts reporting. I said, well, they got a number cruncher back there going, well, there's this many people that can vote and this and that, but it's just made up. And it helps their, them calling elections. Still, right now, there's still 3 Senate seats that aren't determined yet, because there's recounts going on. And also, none of this is true until the canvassing boards actually report their information to the state. Now, in North Dakota, they don't have voter registration. You just have to go vote. You go vote, and you show ID, and that's why they've been messing with the ID thing in North Dakota, because you need to prove where you live. In Minnesota, they have voter registration, and they've been changing that too. They changed the registration forms, and we checked before we went in this election to make sure that, one, we were registered to vote. There was a way on the Minnesota Secretary of State website to check if you have registered, and all 4 of us had. But then in Minnesota, you're not supposed to show your ID. They can't ask for your ID. But I brought them anyways, because I know how people can get messed with. And they have a new system. Now they have little tablets they have to type things into. There's something electronic going on, when we first used to just sign our name by our name.
Right, and that actually caused a problem for me to vote this year, because they were typing in my name into this little tablet, and even though they typed my name, the election judge is a personal friend of mine who knows my name.
And knows where you live,
and knows where I live, and everything.
Yep.
And she typed my name in 3 different times, and my name didn't come up. I wasn't in the system.
Yeah.
It wasn't until she asked for my ID, which they're not supposed to do. That step wouldn't normally be required. But I told you, make sure you to take our IDs with us. And you said, well, they're not supposed to ask us for them. I said, we're Mexicans. We're people of color. If there is a way by which we can be disenfranchised from our votes, we will be.
Yeah. When you told me that too, is like I said, we don't need to show IDs. I not only had IDs, I had passports too. I had double IDs, just in case.
They don't accept passports, because it doesn't have your address.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of reasons why they will decline to use certain types of IDs. But again, disproportionately, this has affected black and brown people. Yep. And here's another beef I have with this. Do you recall the core elections, the hanging chads, everything that happened down in Florida? This is, the anniversary of that. Not that the specific day, this week or last week, we just went by the anniversary of the
Florida recount.
Florida recount, and one of the things that struck me about the tactic that was used at that time was that there are arbitrary set by the state for certification of votes to have to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't counted all the votes by that day, when there's a recount, when there's a recount, you have to get all the votes counted by a date specific. If it's not done by that day, you revert to the original count as to who the winner is. That is flawed and messed up because in Florida currently it's impossible for them to recount all of the votes in that amount of time.
I see.
And that is why there are lawsuits coming forward demanding that there be more time.
Okay.
I believe that in the interest of the truth, in the interest of wanting to truly know who won, I mean, ballots had been found locked up that nobody knows if they were counted.
Mm-hmm.
There's all sorts of fiery rhetoric from the president as well as the current Governor Scott and others in the state, to include today Mr. Marco Rubio, saying that you need to let bygones be bygones, leave it alone. Rubio today even tweeted out some Bible passage about you cannot straighten what is crooked or something like that.
Okay. Wow.
It's not impossible to know who won. Just count the votes.
Yeah.
Allow the process to happen. What is Scott and Rubio and the president so afraid of? Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's Democrats winning.
Yeah.
That's what they're afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
And if you will recall, because of this arbitrary setting of a date in the Florida recount during the Gore and Bush campaign,
mm-hmm.
there was a quote-unquote riot, something that we are seeing kind of being whipped up into a frenzy in Florida currently with all the protests
mm-hmm.
and the stuff that's going on. And they were mostly Washingtonians that were interns and aides that were sent down there by none other than Roger Stone to orchestrate a media coup
mm-hmm.
of those election recounts by going in and sabotaging the ability of those people to complete the recount. They basically came in. They called it the Brooks Brother riot.
Okay.
They had all of these because they were all suited up white men
mm-hmm.
that Roger Stone sent out there, and he basically told them to create, out of whole cloth, create a diversion by holding a riot inside and simply not allowing the poll workers to do their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
All they needed to do to make sure that the poll workers would have to revert to the original count was to block them in their ability to do their job. And I fear it may just happen again.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Without changing these arbitrary rules that are meant to benefit the cheater,
mm-hmm.
the suppressor of votes, we will continue to disenfranchise black and brown voters. And at some point, the GOP just has to be honest about what they're trying to do, what they're trying to achieve here with their gerrymandering
mm-hmm.
and their poll taxes. I mean, all of this amounts to keeping black and brown people from the polls.
Yep.
In another discussion about race, which seems to be all over the news these days, I thought I would end our daily rundown today with a Vice article talking about why, so many white supremacists are into veganism. Here's some interesting history for you. From Hitler to present day, National Socialists with YouTube cooking channels, the far right's anti-meat ideology runs surprisingly deeply. Now, not many people realize that, strange as it sounds, numerous white nationalists are vegan and vegetarian. And it's not just an odd coincidence, but an outgrowth of one of the movement's bedrock beliefs, the concept of blood and soil. The slogan, Hey, can you use your German?
Blut und Boden.
Thank you. In the original German, was popularized by Walther Darre in 1930, although the concepts behind the phrase can be traced back to the 19th century Volkisch movement. Darre was the German Minister of Agriculture from 1933 to 1942 and a staunch advocate for agricultural reform in Nazi Germany. Blood and Soil became a mythical reimagining of German identity, emphasizing the importance of racial heritage, blood, as tied to the land, soil. White nationalists in Charlottesville chanted this phrase, if you will recall, not only to assert that the U.S. is a place for white people, but that white people are racially and spiritually embedded in the soil of America. It's that need to claim a land and a heritage to a place they colonized and stole.
Yep.
That's essentially what that is, dude.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I see that.
Same as the need to claim Native American ancestry.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be rough to be a colonizer that's got a history of genocide, rape, and land theft as your, resume for why you have success, why you have power in this country. Vice continues saying, by romanticizing white people's inherent connection to the land and nature, Blood and Soil also underscores notions of racial purity and nobility. Dietary commitments, then, become a means to prove one's racial superiority. Adolf Hitler, whose vegetarianism is well known in popular culture, certainly connected diet with race. In Hitler's Table Talk, 1941 to 1944, a collection of transcribed monologues delivered by the Fuhrer in conversations with his inner circle, he advocates for vegetarianism as a universally natural and healthy choice, using humans' vegetarian ancestral instincts and young children's antipathy to meat as evidence for his argument. Savitri Devi developed those ideas further. Devi was a Greek national who became prominent in
sophistry.
Thank you. A set of occult traditions that mythologized European people as descended from the original Aryans. After World War II, she wrote books propagating Nazi esotericism and ethical veganism. Using Hinduism as her prime example, she argued that selfish vegetarians abstain from meat for fear of retribution in the afterlife, whereas unselfish Aryan vegetarians demonstrate their superhuman qualities and racial superiority by caring for the welfare of all sentient creatures. Well,
wow.
While that may seem contradictory, how one can support animal rights but deny the rights of other people, there is a long history of animal welfare and environmentalism in white nationalist communities. The Nazi Party, for example, had a green wing that pushed for environmental reforms, including organic farming and reforestation programs and protections for certain species of plants and animals. Along with Hitler, Heinrich Himmler was a vegetarian who opposed vivisection and cruelty toward animals. Far-right organic farming movements emerged in post-war Austria, connecting notions of race, nation, land, and nature. For this niche dietary group, then, the notion of blood and soil lends itself to an idealized vision of Aryan ethical veganism as part of white people's racial purity and heritage. Romanticized veganism can serve as an entry point into white nationalism or to reinforce white nationalist beliefs. Hey, did you know that, Duke?
No, I didn't know any of this.
These ideas persist in white nationalist circles today. Take Aryanism.net, for example. Among all the articles devoted to the history, philosophy, politics of white nationalism, the site is full of pages dedicated to veganism, littered with quotes from Hitler, Hess, Devi, and Joseph Goebbels. The anonymous authors of the site claim that veganism is a hallmark of an authentic national socialist and a sign of genuine empathy and a level of nobility beyond presently popular norms. It's not enough to be vegan, however, like Devi. The webpage is adamant that Aryans should be vegan for ethical reasons and not simply for health and vanity. Rejecting mainstream associations between veganism and pacifist hippie caricatures, they propose that the true vegan archetype is the noble Aryan warrior.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of history. I apologize to any vegetarians out there who don't identify with Aryanism, but we have to understand the history of things so that we don't repeat them.
Definitely.
To get more news like this, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Mexican Online, facebook.com/People's Press Project, and facebook.com/KPPP Radio. You can also follow us on Twitter at media_PPP and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Duke 1517. And that's the Daily Rundown.